The red dust of Mars swirled around the entrance of the abandoned research facility as Marcus Reed checked his suit's oxygen levels one more time. The old building stood half-buried in the rusty soil, its metal walls dulled by decades of exposure to the harsh Martian environment. He had spent 3 years getting permission to explore this site, and now that he was here, his heart wouldn't stop racing. Marcus switched on his helmet lights and stepped through the airlock. The facility's backup power systems still worked after all these years, making his job a little easier. His boots left clear prints in the dust that had managed to sneak inside over the years. According to the old maps, the main research lab should be 2 levels down. The silence was broken only by his breathing and the soft hum of his suit's systems. As he made his way deeper into the facility, his mind wandered to the stories he'd heard about this place. It was one of the first research stations built on Mars, abandoned during the Great Solar Storm of 2047. The evacuation had been so quick that they'd left almost everything behind. A loud beep from his scanner pulled him back to the present. The device was picking up unusual energy readings from somewhere below. Marcus checked his map again and found a stairwell hidden behind a half-closed door. The stairs looked stable enough, but he tested each step carefully before putting his full weight on it. The second level was darker, and the backup lights flickered uncertainly. His scanner's beeping grew stronger as he approached a heavy blast door at the end of a long corridor. It took him several minutes to override the old security system, but finally, the door slid open with a grinding sound that echoed through the empty halls. What he found inside made him freeze. The lab was massive, much bigger than the building plans had shown, and in its center stood something that shouldn't exist. It looked like a cannon, but unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The device was clearly human-made, but its design seemed impossible for the time period. It predated humanity's first spaceflight, yet here it was, on Mars. Marcus was so absorbed in studying the weapon that he almost missed the sound of another airlock cycling. He turned around to find 5 figures entering the lab. Their environmental suits were sleek and advanced, marking them as members of the Collective, the galaxy's leading civilization. The aliens had arrived on Earth 10 years ago, bringing amazing technology and a condescending attitude toward humanity's primitive achievements. Dr. Reed, the tallest figure, said, removing its helmet to reveal Administrator Vex's gray-skinned face. "We're quite disappointed. This area was meant to be sealed until our archaeological team could properly examine it." Marcus stood his ground. "This is a human facility, Administrator. My permits are in order." Vex walked around the weapon, his 4 eyes blinking in different patterns, a sign of amusement among his species. "And what do you make of this artifact?" "It's some kind of weapon system," Marcus replied, watching as the other Collective members scanned the device. "But its design doesn't match anything from the facility's time period. A primitive projectile weapon, nothing more," one of the other aliens said, their voice dripping with disdain. "Barely worth studying." Marcus wanted to argue, but his scanner started beeping frantically. The energy readings from the weapon were spiking. As he watched, small lights began appearing along its surface, and a low hum filled the room. "Interesting," Vex said, though his tone suggested he was anything but impressed. "Your species does have a fascinating habit of preserving museum pieces, though I suppose when your civilization is as young as humanity, even primitive tools seem worth saving." The other Collective members laughed, but Marcus barely heard them. He was too focused on his readings. The energy signature didn't match any known weapon type, not even the advanced ones the Collective had shown them. It was something entirely different, and possibly far more powerful than the aliens realized. "We'll take it from here, Dr. Reed," Vex announced. "The Collective's facilities are much better equipped to study such artifacts, though I doubt we'll learn anything of value from such outdated technology." "With all due respect, Administrator," Marcus said carefully, "this is a human relic found in a human facility. It falls under Earth's jurisdiction." Vex's upper eyes narrowed while his lower ones widened, a clear sign of annoyance. "Dr. Reed, You seem to be under the impression that you have a choice in this matter. The Collective's Archaeological Division has ultimate authority over all significant technological discoveries in this sector. Or did you forget the terms of our partnership? Marcus knew he was right about the terms, but something felt wrong about this whole situation. The Collective had never shown this much interest in human artifacts before. Why were they so eager to claim this one? I'll need to report this to Earth Command, Marcus said, trying to buy time while he recorded as much data as he could. Of course, Vex replied smoothly. Report whatever you wish. My team will begin preparations to move the artifact immediately. As the Collective members began setting up their equipment, Marcus made his way to the lab's communication terminal. The energy readings were still climbing, and he needed to get this information to Earth before the Collective took over. He had a feeling this primitive weapon was far more important than anyone realized. What he didn't know yet was that this discovery would change everything. The weapon he'd found wasn't just an old relic. It was proof that humanity's past held secrets that even the Collective couldn't comprehend. And soon, everyone would understand just how dangerous it could be to underestimate humanity's primitive technology. As Marcus sent his data burst to Earth, he took one last look at the weapon. The humming had grown louder, and more lights were appearing across its surface. Whatever this thing was, he had a feeling they'd all find out soon enough. The only question was whether humanity would get to unlock its secrets, or if the Collective would bury this discovery like they had so many others. 2 weeks after the discovery on Mars, Marcus sat in his small lab on Earth, staring at the data readings for the 100th time. The Collective had taken the weapon, but they couldn't take the information he'd managed to gather. Something about those energy signatures kept bothering him. They didn't make any sense, almost as if the weapon was designed to work in ways that broke the laws of physics. A knock on his door made him look up. Linda Torres, his research assistant, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and a worried look on her face. You need to see this, she said, placing 1 cup on his desk and turning on the wall screen. The news feed showed a massive Collective ship hanging in orbit around Jupiter. It wasn't one of their usual diplomatic vessels or trade ships. This was something else entirely, a warship. As Marcus watched, more ships appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel like deadly rain. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Linda said, her voice tight with concern. This came in 10 minutes ago. The Collective is demanding an emergency meeting with Earth's leaders. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd seen that look in Administrator Vex's eyes back on Mars. The look of someone who'd finally found what they'd been searching for. They were never here to help us, were they? The answer came 3 hours later. Every screen on Earth lit up with Administrator Vex's face. His 4 eyes weren't showing any signs of amusement now. People of Earth, he began, his voice cold and clear. For 10 years, we have watched your civilization develop. We have guided you, studied you, and evaluated you. Today, we have reached our conclusion. The camera pulled back to show the weapon they'd found on Mars, now mounted on some kind of testing platform. Your kind has a disturbing tendency to create weapons of incredible destructive power. We found this one before you could restore it, but we know there are others. The Collective cannot allow potentially dangerous species to threaten the peace we have maintained for 10,000 years. Marcus grabbed his phone and called Linda. She answered before the first ring finished. I'm already on my way to the lab, she said. Meet me there. On screen, Vex continued. You have 2 Earth days to surrender all military assets and submit to full Collective control. Any resistance will be met with immediate planetary punishment. To demonstrate our resolve, the camera view shifted to show one of Jupiter's smaller moons. There was a flash of light from the Collective fleet, and the moon simply disappeared. No explosion, no debris field. It was just gone, taking 3 research bases and 500 human colonists with it. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us, Vex said. Your technology is nothing compared to ours. Submit, or face extinction. The broadcast cut off, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Marcus ran to his lab, his mind racing. The weapon they'd found. Those impossible energy readings. What if they weren't impossible at all? What if they were just beyond anything modern science could explain? Linda was already at work when he arrived, her fingers flying over 3 different keyboards. The energy signature, she said without looking up. It wasn't a normal weapon pattern because it wasn't just a weapon. Look at this. She pulled up 2 displays, one showing the readings from Mars, the other showing long-range scans of the destroyed moon. The patterns matched. They didn't want the weapon because it was dangerous, Marcus said, finally understanding. They wanted it because they recognized what it could do. They've seen it before. Linda nodded. The weapon isn't primitive at all. It's way beyond anything we have now. Someone in Earth's past built a planet killer, then hid it away. The question is, who and why? They worked through the night, digging through the data Marcus had collected. More collective ships arrived every hour, taking up positions around Earth's solar system. They were boxing humanity in, preparing for either surrender or slaughter. But with each passing hour, Marcus and Linda uncovered more about the weapon's true nature. It didn't fire normal projectiles or energy beams. Instead, it somehow targeted the fundamental frequency of matter itself, causing it to simply cease existing. The amount of power needed to make it work was enormous, far beyond anything humanity had when it was built. Look at these markings, Linda said, zooming in on one of the images from Mars. They're not random damage. They're words, just really worn down. And they're in English. Marcus leaned in close, squinting at the screen. As Linda enhanced the image, his eyes widened. Warning, he read slowly. Use only as last resort. The cost of power is high, but the cost of failure is extinction. That's not all, Linda said, her voice shaking slightly. I found a reference to this kind of technology in some old folklore, stories about a civilization that existed on Earth long before recorded history. They were supposed to have built amazing things, then vanished overnight. Most historians dismiss it as myth, but a loud alarm cut through the air. On their screens, they could see the collective fleet moving into attack formation. They weren't going to wait 2 days. The attack was starting now. Marcus grabbed his phone and called Earth Command. Get me the Defense Council, he said. Now, tell them we found something about the weapon from Mars. Tell them we might have a way to fight back. As he waited to be connected, he looked at the image of the collective fleet. Their ships were beautiful, powerful, and utterly advanced. They thought they had humanity trapped and helpless. But they had made one huge mistake. They had assumed that just because something was old, it had to be primitive. They had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous weapons are the ones that time forgot. Now humanity just had to hope they could figure out how to use it before the collective decided to demonstrate their power again. This time on Earth itself. Last edited 3 days ago. The underground bunker of Earth Command buzzed with activity as Marcus and Linda presented their findings. The room was filled with military leaders and scientists, all watching the holographic display of the ancient weapon schematics. Outside, the sky had turned an eerie purple as the collective's ships entered the upper atmosphere, their energy fields distorting the light of the sun. The weapon doesn't just destroy things, Linda explained, pointing to the complex energy patterns on the screen. It erases them completely. It targets the specific frequency that holds matter together in our universe. Like tuning a radio to exactly the right station, but instead of music, you get nothing. One of the generals leaned forward, his face lined with worry. And you're certain this weapon was made on Earth? By humans? Marcus nodded, pulling up the images of the worn text they'd found. By humans, yes, but not from any civilization we know of. The technology is far beyond anything we should have been capable of back then. These energy readings suggest whoever built it had mastered power sources we're only theorizing about now. What kind of power are we talking about? Another scientist asked. Linda took a deep breath. Based on our calculations, to fire at once would take the same amount of energy as 100 modern fusion reactors running at full power. The builders left notes warning that using it required an enormous power cost. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Above them, the collected ships had finished forming their attack pattern. Their deadline for surrender was still 12 hours away, but no one believed they would wait that long. Marcus walked to the main display and brought up a new set of readings. We've been testing the principles behind the weapon on a small scale. Watch this. He played a video showing a tiny version of the device, powered by a portable fusion cell. When activated, it fired at a block of steel. The metal didn't melt or explode. It simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind, not even dust. That was with just a fraction of the power it was designed to use. Linda added, "Imagine that effect scaled up to planetary size." One of the military advisors spoke up. "The collective ships have shields, advanced energy barriers. How do we know this would even work against them?" "Because they're scared of it," Marcus said simply. "Think about it. They came to Earth claiming to be peaceful, but they spent 10 years searching for something. When they found this weapon, they immediately dropped their friendly act. They recognized what it could do, and their first move was to take it away from us." A warning siren cut through the air. On the main screens, they could see the collective ships moving into attack position over major cities. They weren't going to wait for their own deadline. "They're starting with Mars," someone shouted. "Multiple energy signatures detected." The room watched in horror as beams of light struck the red planet. Massive explosions bloomed across its surface as human colonies were wiped out one by one. The message was clear: surrender or be next. How long would it take to power up the weapon? The head of Earth Command asked, his voice steady despite the terror unfolding on the screens. Linda checked her calculations. "If we redirect power from every major fusion plant on Earth, maybe 6 hours. But we have to shut down almost everything else. Cities, defense systems, everything. And we'd only get one shot," Marcus added. "The power draw would burn out most of our infrastructure." The general nodded grimly. "One shot is all we need, if it works. Begin the power diversion. And someone get me a line to Administrator Vex. Let's see if we can buy some time." As the room burst into action, Marcus and Linda rushed to their equipment. They had studied the weapon's control systems extensively, but actually firing it would be another matter entirely. One wrong calculation, one misaligned frequency, and their one shot would be wasted. Time seemed to blur as they worked. Reports kept coming in of more attacks on Mars, each one destroying another piece of humanity's first colony world. The collective was being methodical, making Earth watch as they erased years of human achievement. 5 hours into their preparation, all the screens lit up with Administrator Vex's face. His 4 eyes showed no emotion as he spoke. "Your time grows short, humans. Mars burns as an example. Earth will be next. Submit now, and we may show mercy." The head of Earth Command stood straight as he replied, "We notice you haven't used the weapon you took from us. Could it be you're afraid to touch it? Afraid it might do to you what it did to its last targets?" For the first time, they saw uncertainty flicker across Vex's alien features. "Your primitive relic is useless. We merely kept it to prevent you from harming yourselves with it. Then you won't mind if we tell you we found another one," Linda said suddenly, stepping into view, "and we figured out how to power it." The change in Vex's expression was subtle but unmistakable. Fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. The transmission cut off abruptly. "They're moving their ships back," someone reported, "pulling out of the atmosphere. New formation. They're clustering together. Defensive pattern." Marcus looked at the power readings. They were at 80% of what they needed. The weapon's control systems were humming with energy, ancient machinery coming fully alive for the first time in thousands of years. "They're afraid," he said softly. "They know exactly what this weapon can do. The only question is, do we know enough to make it work?" Linda squeezed his shoulder. "I guess we'll find out. One way or another, Earth's future depends on us understanding our past. Let's hope our ancestors left us enough clues to finish what they started. Above them, the collective fleet continued to gather, preparing for what they thought would be their moment of triumph. They had no way of knowing that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't the relic they'd stolen. It was humanity's habit of studying, preserving, and learning from the past. The ancient weapons control room had been rebuilt deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Marcus and Linda worked frantically as a countdown timer on the wall showed they had less than 1 hour before the collective resumed their attack. Power from across the globe was being channeled into the facility, causing the lights to flicker and the temperature to rise as systems strained under the immense energy flow. Final calibration sequence, Linda said, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked. We're reaching power levels that shouldn't be possible with our current technology. Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the readouts. The ancients designed it to draw power from multiple sources at once. It's like the weapon itself is amplifying what we're feeding it. He looked up at the main screen showing the collective fleet. Their ships had formed a tight defensive cluster, as if they knew what was coming. The room was crowded with military personnel and the world's top scientists, all watching in tense silence. Earth's remaining defensive ships had positioned themselves in a protective formation around the planet, though everyone knew they wouldn't last long against the collective's superior weapons. A general stepped forward, his face grim. We just lost contact with the lunar base. The collective is taking out our off-world communications one by one. They're isolating us, Linda said without looking up from her work, cutting us off before the final strike. Marcus checked the power levels one more time. They were at 94% and climbing slowly. We need more time, he said. The weapon will fire at 100%, but optimal targeting requires a full power cycle first. Otherwise, we might miss. The head of Earth Command rubbed his tired eyes. We don't have more time. Look. On the screen, several collective ships were breaking away from the main fleet, moving into attack positions. Their weapon systems were powering up, glowing with the same energy that had destroyed Mars. We need a distraction, the general said. Something to buy us those extra minutes. As if in answer, a young officer burst into the room. Sir, the Pacific Defense Fleet is moving into engagement range. Admiral Greaves says they'll draw the collective's attention. Everyone watched as Earth's ships, looking tiny compared to the massive alien vessels, accelerated toward the enemy. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. Tell Greaves, the general started, then paused. Tell him the whole planet is watching. Make it count. On the main screen, Earth's ships opened fire on the collective fleet. Their weapons seemed pathetically weak, barely scratching the advanced shields. But it worked. The collective ships that had been preparing to attack Earth turned to deal with this unexpected threat. They're buying us time, Linda whispered. We can't waste it. Marcus nodded, focusing back on the weapon controls. The ancient systems responded to their adjustments, the power level climbing to 97%, then 98%. Marcus studied the targeting system, trying to understand the complex calculations involved. The weapon didn't target a physical location. It targeted the unique frequency of matter itself. I think I see it now, he said suddenly. The targeting system isn't just spatial coordinates. It's looking for a specific pattern in the fabric of reality, like tuning a radio to exactly the right station. Linda looked up. The collective ships all use the same shield frequency. If we target that specific pattern, we could take out their entire fleet with one shot, Marcus finished. His hands flew over the controls, inputting the new parameters. On the screen, Earth's ships were being destroyed one by one. Admiral Greaves' flagship was the last to fall, ramming itself into a collective vessel in a final act of defiance. The sacrifice had worked, though. The power level had reached 99%. Target locked, Linda announced. The weapon is identifying the collective's main command ship based on its energy signature. The room fell silent as the final preparations were made. The ancient weapon hummed with power, a deep vibration that seemed to resonate with the Earth itself. Outside the facility, the sky had darkened as power stations across the planet directed all their output to this single purpose. 100%, Marcus said quietly. We're ready. The head of Earth Command stepped forward. Do it. Marcus took a deep breath and pressed his hand against the activation panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the facility lights dimmed completely as the weapon drew its final power surge. A low, singing tone filled the air, building in intensity until everyone had to cover their ears. On the screen, a beam of pure white light shot up from somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. It looked almost delicate, like a thread of silk stretching into space. The collective ships didn't react at first, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Energy signature climbing beyond measurable levels. Someone reported, their voice filled with awe. The beam is somehow gaining power as it travels. The white light reached the collective's command ship and seemed to stop. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the light changed, spreading across the surface of the ship like water. Where it touched, matter simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect voids in the shape of the vessel. It's working, Linda whispered. The effect spread from ship to ship, following the connections of their shared shield frequency. Within moments, half the collective fleet had vanished, not destroyed but simply erased from existence. The remaining ships tried to flee, breaking formation and scattering in all directions. The beam followed, splitting into dozens of smaller threads, each seeking out its target with perfect precision. In less than a minute, the entire collective attack force had vanished. The room erupted in cheers, but Marcus kept his eyes on the readings. Something's happening, he said, raising his voice to be heard. The weapon is still active. The beam, now barely visible from Earth, had changed course. It was stretching further into space, towards something beyond their solar system. It's targeting their homeworld. Linda realized, her face pale. The weapon isn't just hitting their ships. It's following the frequency back to its source. The room fell silent again as they watched the beam stretch beyond their tracking capabilities. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then their deep space sensors detected a massive energy surge from the direction of the collective's home system. My God, someone whispered. Did we just? Before anyone could answer, every screen in the facility lit up with Administrator Vex's face. For once, all 4 of his eyes showed the same emotion. Terror. What have you done? He demanded, his voice shaking. That weapon was never meant to be used. It was sealed away for a reason. Marcus stepped forward. You threatened our planet. You destroyed our colonies. What did you expect us to do? You don't understand, Vex said, actual fear breaking through his usually composed demeanor. That weapon doesn't just destroy. It erases. Completely. Our main world is gone, along with 3 billion lives. Just gone. The implications of what they'd done settled heavily on everyone in the room. They had just wiped out an entire planet with a single shot. 3 days after the weapon fired, Marcus stood at the observation window of the International Space Station, watching the remains of the collective fleet retreat from Earth's solar system. The once mighty armada was reduced to a handful of ships, their engines pushed to maximum as they fled from the planet they had so recently threatened to destroy. Earth had won, but the victory felt hollow. The weapon had done far more than they had intended, reaching across space to erase the collective's homeworld from existence. 3 billion lives gone in an instant. Marcus couldn't help but wonder if they had become the very monster they had fought against. You couldn't have known, Linda said, floating up beside him. She had dark circles under her eyes from 3 days without proper sleep. The weapon was designed to follow energy signatures to their source. No one could have predicted it would reach that far. Marcus sighed, his breath fogging the reinforced glass. We should have tried harder to understand it before we used it. The ancient builders must have sealed it away for a reason. The space station shuddered slightly as a shuttle docked. It would be carrying the representatives from Earth Command, and what remained of the collective leadership. Both sides had agreed to meet on neutral ground, away from the weapon that had changed everything. "It's time," Linda said quietly. The conference room was tense as humans and aliens sat across from each other. Administrator Vex looked diminished somehow, his usually perfect posture now slumped with the weight of loss. 3 other collective leaders accompanied him, their 4-eyed gazes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. The head of Earth Command spoke first. "We regret the extent of the damage caused by the ancient weapon. It was never our intention to target civilian populations." Vex's laugh was bitter. "Yet you were willing to use a weapon you didn't understand, against an enemy you knew nothing about." His upper eyes narrowed. "Did you ever wonder why that weapon was on Mars? Why it was sealed away and not on display as a testament to human achievement?" Marcus leaned forward. "We assumed it was hidden to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." "It was hidden because it should never have been built," Vex snapped. "Some technologies are too dangerous to exist, even as a deterrent." One of the other collective leaders spoke, her voice softer than Vex. "What you discovered wasn't a human weapon at all. It was built to fight us, yes, but not by your kind." A confused murmur ran through the human side of the table. The female alien continued. "Long before your recorded history, another species lived on Earth. They were peaceful, advanced, curious, much like you. We called them the predecessors." Vex picked up the story, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "The collective wasn't always what it is today. 10,000 years ago, we were conquerors, moving from system to system, taking what we wanted. Earth was just another target." Linda's eyes widened. "The ancient civilization in our myths, the ones who supposedly vanished overnight. They didn't vanish," the female alien said. "They fought back. They built weapons like the one you found, designed to target our specific energy signatures. But in the final battle, when they activated their defense system, it worked too well." Marcus finished, understanding dawning on his face. "It didn't just target your ships. It followed the energy pattern all the way back to your homeworld." Vex nodded slowly. "Just as you did to us. History repeats itself, it seems." The predecessors were horrified by what they'd done. They had only meant to defend themselves, not commit genocide. In their shame, they sealed away their weapons, scattered them across your solar system. And then, he paused. "Then what?" the Earth Command leader asked. "They left," Vex said simply. "Abandoned this world and their technology. They couldn't bear to live with what they had done." The collective survivors swore never to conquer again, to become protectors instead of destroyers. "For 10,000 years, we've kept that promise." "Until you came to Earth," Marcus said. "Why? If you had changed your ways, why come here at all?" The female alien answered. "Our scientists detected the weapon's energy signature becoming active again. We feared the predecessors had returned, or worse, the humans had found their technology without understanding the dangers. We came to find and contain the weapons before they could be used again." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The collective hadn't come as conquerors, but as guardians, trying to prevent history from repeating itself. Yet their secrecy and condescension had created the very conflict they sought to avoid. "You should have told us the truth from the beginning," Linda said. "Instead, you treated us like children, hiding the real reason you were here." "Would you have believed us?" Vex asked. "Or would you have seen our warnings as an attempt to keep powerful weapons out of human hands? We observe your history. You don't exactly have a record of putting aside weapons once you found them." No one on the human side could argue with that point. The head of Earth Command cleared his throat. "So where do we go from here? Your fleet is decimated. Our planet is intact, but our power grid is in shambles. Neither of us is in a position to continue fighting." Vex looked at his fellow collective members, then back at the humans. "We propose a true alliance this time. No more secrets, no more condescension. We help you rebuild, and you help us find any remaining predecessor weapons before they can cause more harm." And then what? Marcus asked. Do we destroy them? No, Vex said, surprising everyone. We study them together, carefully, in controlled environments. The predecessors were more advanced than either of our civilizations. Their technology could benefit the galaxy if properly understood and safely adapted. Discussions continued for hours, hammering out the details of this new relationship. By the time they finished, the first tentative steps toward genuine cooperation had been taken. As Marcus and Linda prepared to return to Earth, they stood one last time at the observation window. The blue-green planet below them looked peaceful from this distance, showing no signs of the near extinction they had faced. Do you think it will work? Linda asked. This alliance. Marcus considered the question carefully. I think we both learned some hard lessons. The collective learned not to underestimate primitive species, and we learned that just because we can use a technology doesn't mean we should. Linda nodded. The predecessors must have felt the same way. Powerful enough to wipe out their enemies, but wise enough to walk away from that power afterward. Maybe that's the real test of an advanced civilization, Marcus said. Not what you can build, but what you choose not to use. As their shuttle detached from the station and began its descent, both humans watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the predecessors might still exist, watching to see what their inheritors would do with the world they'd left behind. Marcus hoped they would be proud of the choice humanity had made today, to learn from the past rather than repeat it. The ancient weapon remained sealed in its bunker, its power source disconnected. It would be studied carefully, jointly by human and collective scientists, with safeguards to prevent it from ever being fired again. A reminder that some relics deserve respect, not because they're powerful, but because of the terrible lessons they teach. Earth would never again underestimate the dangers of the past, nor would the collective dismiss the potential of younger races. Together, they would face whatever challenges the universe held next, wiser, humbler, and united by the understanding that came from nearly destroying each other. The stars flickered as the UES Defiant tore through the fabric of space, emerging from hyperspace like a phantom in the night. The massive warship, nearly a mile long, represented humanity's greatest achievement, and perhaps its last hope. Inside the bridge, Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face reflecting off the reinforced windows that separated him from the endless void of space. Status report, Walker said, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The bridge crew, just 15 of the total 150 aboard, worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. All systems operational, Captain, replied Thomas, the ship's lead engineer. The stealth systems are holding steady, and our new shield modifications are running at optimal levels. He paused, checking his displays. But I should remind you that we've never tested them in actual combat. Walker nodded. They hadn't had time to test much of anything. The Stellar Empire's invasion had come swiftly and brutally, overwhelming humanity's outer colonies one by one. Earth's fleet, spread thin across dozens of systems, had been caught off guard and destroyed piecemeal. Now, only the Defiant stood between the Empire and Earth itself. Sensor report, Walker called out, moving to the central holographic display that dominated the bridge. The massive screen showed their position relative to Imperial space, a vast territory that stretched across thousands of light years. Long-range sensors are picking up the Imperial Armada, answered Lisa from her station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she brought up detailed scans. 10,000 ships, just as our intelligence reported. They're moving in standard Imperial formation, heading directly for the Sol system. The bridge fell silent as the information sank in. 10,000 ships against one. The Empire's fleet was a sight that had brought hundreds of alien civilizations to their knees over 3,000 years. Each Imperial vessel was a marvel of engineering, powered by technology that humanity had only begun to understand. But Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Empire, for all its power and history, had grown complacent. They expected every race they encountered to fight the same way they did, with massive fleets meeting in open space, following the strict rules of engagement that the Empire had established millennia ago. "Tell me about their formation," Walker said, zooming in on the holographic display. The Imperial ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, like a giant mathematical equation given form in space. "Classic Imperial Wolfpack formation," answered Mark, the tactical officer. "They're arranged in layers, with their heaviest warships forming a sphere around their command vessels. Smaller ships patrol the outer edges. It's the same formation they've used for the past 1,000 years. And that's exactly why we're going to beat them," Walker said, addressing his crew. The Empire hasn't faced a serious challenge in centuries. They'd forgotten how to adapt, how to think differently. He touched the display, highlighting key points in the Imperial formation. "They expect us to either surrender or die gloriously in a hopeless battle. They don't expect us to fight smart." A light began blinking on the engineering console. "Captain," Thomas called out, "we're receiving the automated Imperial surrender demand. Standard message: submit to Imperial authority or face complete annihilation." Walker stepped back to his command chair, settling into it with deliberate calmness. "Send no response. Let them think their message was lost in space. Meanwhile, plot a course that will take us behind that outer patrol line. We're going to show the Empire why humanity has survived every challenge we've ever faced." The Defiant moved silently through space, its revolutionary stealth systems making it nearly invisible to Imperial sensors. The massive ship, despite its size, produced no more energy signature than a small asteroid. This was humanity's secret weapon, technology developed not through millennia of gradual advancement like the Empire, but through desperate innovation in the face of extinction. As they approached the Imperial fleet, Walker studied the enemy ships through the enhanced viewing screens. The Imperial vessels were beautiful in their own way, all sweeping lines and golden hulls that reflected the starlight. They were designed to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. But Walker saw something else. He saw arrogance given physical form. "Ready all weapons," Walker commanded, "but hold fire until my mark. We're not here to start a battle. We're here to start a war of nerves." He turned to his communication officer. "Is the package ready?" "Yes, sir," came the response. "Ready to broadcast on all Imperial frequencies." Walker nodded. The package was a carefully crafted message, designed to do something the Empire had never experienced in its 3,000 years of conquest: make them afraid. "Take us in closer," Walker ordered. The Defiant slipped between two Imperial patrol ships, close enough to see the crews moving behind their illuminated windows. No alarms sounded. No weapons turned to track them. They were invisible, a ghost ship sliding through the heart of the mightiest fleet in known space. "Sir," Lisa called out, her voice tight with tension, "we're picking up communications from the Imperial command ship. They're ordering the fleet to begin acceleration toward Earth. They're starting their attack run." "Perfect timing," Walker said. "Send the package. All frequencies, maximum power." Across every Imperial ship, every communication device, every screen and holographic display, the same image appeared: detailed scans of Imperial ship designs, defense configurations, and patrol routes. Along with the data was a simple message: "We see you. We know you. We can reach you anywhere." The effect was immediate. The perfectly ordered Imperial formation rippled as ships began breaking formation, commanders ordering emergency scans and defensive maneuvers. The Empire had never faced an enemy that could penetrate their security so completely, could stand invisible in their midst. Multiple emergency signals being broadcast, Lisa reported, trying to hide a smile. "They're trying to figure out how we got this information. Several ships are reporting possible system breaches." Walker stood, walking to the front of the bridge to watch the chaos unfold. "The Empire has spent 3,000 years teaching everyone to fear them," he said quietly. "They've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid themselves. That changes today." The Defiant hung in space, watching as the mighty Imperial Armada scrambled to respond to a threat they couldn't see or understand. In the confusion, 3 Imperial ships collided, their perfect formation shattered by panic. Others fired weapons at sensor ghosts, their crews jumping at shadows. "Take us out," Walker ordered as the chaos reached its peak. "Nice and slow. Let them wonder if we're still there, watching them." He turned to his crew, seeing the hope in their eyes that had replaced the fear of just hours before. "The Empire thinks that power comes from size, from numbers, from brute force. We're going to teach them that real power comes from here." He tapped his temple, and from here, he placed a hand over his heart. As the Defiant slipped away into the darkness of space, Walker knew that this was just the beginning. The Empire had never lost a war because they had never faced an enemy who understood that victory doesn't always come from destroying your opponent. Sometimes, victory comes from making them destroy themselves. Behind them, the Imperial Armada's advance toward Earth had stopped. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and therefore couldn't defeat. The mighty Empire had taken its first step toward learning what every human knew from birth, that the universe's greatest power isn't strength, but the ability to adapt, to think differently, and to turn apparent weakness into unconquerable strength. 3 days after their first encounter with the Imperial fleet, the UEA's Defiant hung silently in the shadow of a massive gas giant. The huge planet storms helped mask their presence, though Walker knew they hardly needed the help. The Empire's ships had been searching frantically for them, but their stealth technology remained unbeatable. "Show me the supply route again," Walker said, studying the holographic display. A red line appeared, marking the path that Imperial supply ships used to support their massive invasion fleet. Without these supply lines, the mighty Armada would be stopped as surely as if they'd been destroyed in battle. "Next convoy is due in 6 hours," Mark reported from his tactical station. 5 supply ships, 2 escort cruisers. Standard Imperial procedure. He paused, checking his readings. "They're running scared, Captain. The escorts used to be light frigates. Now they're using heavy cruisers." Walker nodded, satisfied. Fear was spreading through the Imperial ranks exactly as he planned. Every ship that moved through Imperial space now did so with the knowledge that the ghost ship called Defiant might be watching, might be waiting to strike. "Engineering. How are we looking?" Walker asked, knowing they'd pushed their systems hard during the past days of constant stealth operations. "All green, Captain," Thomas replied proudly. "The crew's got maintenance down to an art now. We can run silent for another 2 weeks if we need to." He didn't mention the fact that they'd been sleeping in shifts, working around the clock to keep their experimental systems running perfectly. Lisa's voice cut through the quiet bridge. "Captain, intercepting Imperial communications." They're fascinating." She worked quickly to translate the messages. "The Imperial commanders are fighting among themselves. 3 different escort commanders are claiming they saw us in 3 different systems. They're accusing each other of incompetence." "Perfect," Walker said softly. "The Empire's greatest weakness is their pride. They can't admit when they're wrong, can't accept that someone might be better than them at anything." He stood from his command chair, walking to the main viewport. "Time to push them harder. Prepare for attack run." The Defiant moved silently through space, approaching the supply route like a shark closing in on its prey. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, everyone knowing their role in the complex dance they were about to perform. They'd done this twice already in the past 3 days, each attack carefully planned to cause maximum psychological impact. "Supply convoy entering sensor range," Mark announced. "Right on schedule." Imperial precision working against them again. Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Empire's rigid adherence to schedules and procedures made them predictable. Predictability in space warfare was as good as painting a target on your ships. "Take us in. Standard attack pattern." Walker's voice was calm, but everyone on the bridge felt the tension rise. Each attack was a risk, each encounter a chance that the Empire might get lucky and spot them. The Defiant glided between the escort cruisers, completely invisible to their sensors. Walker watched through the viewing screen as they passed close enough to see individual windows on the Imperial ships. The massive cruisers, each one nearly the size of the Defiant, swept their sensors back and forth, searching for threats they could sense but not see. "In position," Mark reported. "All weapons locked on target." Walker took a deep breath. "Execute." The Defiant's stealth field dropped for exactly 3 seconds. In that time, precision-guided missiles streaked out from hidden launchers, each one targeting a specific system on the supply ships. The Empire's ships, designed to fight battles of brute force, never had a chance to raise their shields. Explosions rippled across the supply ships' hulls, not destroying them, but precisely crippling their engines, weapons, and communications. The escort cruisers spun in place, their sensors finally detecting the Defiant, but by then the human ship was already gone, its stealth field back in place. "Clean hits on all targets," Mark reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Supply ships are dead in space. Escort cruisers are launching fighters, but they're shooting blind." "Send the message," Walker ordered. Lisa transmitted their prepared broadcast. On every Imperial ship in range, screens lit up with the same message. "Your supplies are now our supplies. Your ships are now our targets. The Ghost is always watching." The bridge crew watched as panic spread through the Imperial formation. The escort cruisers began firing randomly into space, their powerful weapons harmlessly passing through areas where they thought the Defiant might be. Fighter craft zoomed in all directions, their pilots desperately searching for an enemy they had no hope of finding. "Imperial reinforcements incoming," Lisa reported. "They're calling every combat ship within 3 light years. 8 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers." She paused, listening to more transmissions. "They're arguing about who's in command. Each captain is claiming they have priority." Walker nodded. "Everything going according to plan." Time to add to their confusion. "Engineering, prepare for Phase 2. Thomas's fingers flew across his console. "Ready, Captain. Though I still say this is crazy." "Crazy is exactly what we need," Walker replied. "Execute." The Defiant's experimental systems shifted into a configuration that had never been tested in combat before. Instead of merely hiding from sensors, they began broadcasting false signals, creating sensor ghosts that looked exactly like the Defiant. Suddenly, the Imperial ship's sensors showed 5 Defiant-class vessels surrounding them. The Empire's carefully organized response dissolved into chaos. Ships turned to face different threats. Commanders shouted contradictory orders, and in the confusion, 3 Imperial vessels collided, their shields flaring as they scraped against each other. "Multiple distress calls," Lisa reported, trying to track all the communications. "Half the Imperial commanders think they're under attack by a human battle fleet. The others are trying to convince them it's not real." She looked up at Walker. "They're completely disorganized." "That's what happens when you spend 3,000 years thinking you're invincible," Walker said. "You forget how to handle being afraid." He watched as more Imperial ships arrived, adding to the confusion rather than helping to resolve it. "Take us out, nice and slow. Let them keep chasing shadows." The Defiant slipped away, leaving behind a scene of chaos. The mighty Imperial warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, were reduced to shooting at sensor ghosts and jumping at shadows. The supply convoy, carrying fuel and ammunition that the invasion fleet desperately needed, would now have to be rescued and repaired, causing delays that the Empire couldn't afford. As they reached safe distance, Walker addressed his crew. "The Empire thinks they lost today because we have better stealth technology. But that's not why we won. We won because they can't imagine anyone being better than them at anything. That pride, that inability to adapt or admit weakness, that's what we're really fighting." The bridge crew nodded, understanding. They'd just watched the mightiest military force in known space fall apart because they couldn't handle an enemy that didn't fight the way they expected. The Empire had spent so long being the strongest that they'd forgotten how to be smart. "Get some rest," Walker ordered his crew. "Tomorrow we hit another convoy, and another the day after that. Every day we'll show the Empire that all their power, all their ships, all their technology means nothing against an enemy they can't understand." As the crew began their rest rotation, Walker remained on the bridge, watching the distant flares of Imperial ships still firing at phantoms. He knew that somewhere in the Empire's vast fleet, someone would be learning from this, trying to understand how a single human ship could cause so much chaos. That person would be dangerous, would be a real threat. But for now, the Empire's own pride would keep them from listening to anyone who suggested they might need to change. The Defiant had become more than just a ship. It had become fear itself, a ghost that haunted the dreams of Imperial commanders. And fear, Walker knew, was the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created. The Imperial command ship Eternal Glory floated in space, its golden hull reflecting the light of nearby stars. Commander Reed stood at its main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, as he studied the holographic displays showing the Empire's recent defeats. For 2 weeks, the human ship Defiant had struck at will, disappearing like smoke each time the Empire's forces tried to respond. "Show me the pattern again," Reed ordered. Unlike his fellow commanders, who raged at their inability to catch the ghost ship, Reed had spent days studying every encounter, every attack. He had done something no Imperial commander had done in centuries. He had started learning from his enemy. "Sir, there is no pattern," his subordinate replied nervously. "The human ship appears randomly. We cannot predict." "There is always a pattern," Reed interrupted. "We simply haven't learned to see it yet." He walked to the central tactical display, where red dots marked each of the Defiant's attacks. "These humans, they think differently from us. We must learn to think as they do." Aboard the Defiant, Captain Walker was facing challenges of his own. The constant stealth operations had pushed their systems to the limit. The crew was tired, working endless hours to keep their technological edge over the Empire. "Status report," Walker called out, noting the dark circles under his crew's eyes. "Main stealth systems at 60%, Captain," Thomas reported from engineering. "We can't keep running them continuously like this. We need at least 12 hours of downtime for proper maintenance." Walker nodded grimly. They'd known this would happen eventually. No ship, no matter how advanced, could operate at peak performance indefinitely. Options. "There's a debris field from an old battle," Mark suggested from tactical. "Lots of metal and radiation. It would help mask our signature while we do repairs." "Make it happen," Walker ordered. The Defiant changed course, sliding through space toward the distant debris field. They'd destroyed or disabled 15 Imperial supply convoys in 2 weeks. The Empire's mighty invasion fleet was starting to feel the strain, their ships running low on fuel and ammunition. But as the Defiant approached the debris field, Lisa's voice cut through the bridge's quiet. "Captain, multiple Imperial ships dropping out of hyperspace." Walker spun toward the tactical display. 5 Imperial heavy cruisers had appeared, their formation unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of the Empire's usual rigid patterns, these ships moved flexibly, covering each other's blind spots. "They're using our tactics," Walker realized, a chill running down his spine. Someone in their command structure is learning. The Imperial ships launched clouds of sensor drones, flooding the area with scanning beams. The Defiant's stealth systems, already strained from weeks of continuous operation, struggled to compensate for the increased scrutiny. "Engineering, status," Walker demanded as warning lights began flashing across multiple stations. "Stealth systems failing," Thomas reported, his fingers flying across his controls. "Too many sensor beams, too many frequencies to mask. We need to shut down for a reset, or we'll burn out completely." Walker's mind raced. For the first time, They faced an Imperial commander who thought like a human, adapting, learning, using their own tactics against them. The debris field that was supposed to be their shelter had become a trap. "New transmission," Lisa announced. "It's different from their usual demands." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in carefully practiced human English. "To the crew of the UES Defiant, I am Commander Reed of the Imperial Fleet. Your tactics have taught us much. You have earned the right to surrender with honor. End this hunt now, and your lives will be spared." Walker smiled grimly. "He really has been studying us. He's trying to think like a human." He turned to his crew. "But he's still thinking like an Imperial, trying to script everything. Time to show him how humans really fight." "Sir, we can't maintain stealth," Thomas warned. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Walker nodded. "Drop the stealth field. All power to weapons and shields." As his crew stared at him in shock, he smiled. "They want to learn how humans fight. Let's teach them." The Defiant flickered into visibility, its stealth field dissolving to reveal the massive warship in all its glory. The Imperial ships immediately moved to surround them, but Walker had already put his plan into motion. "Launch all drones," he ordered. The Defiant released dozens of small automated craft, but instead of attacking, the drones flew into the debris field, their engines scattering the ancient wreckage in all directions. "Massive sensor interference," Lisa reported. "The debris is creating thousands of false readings." The Imperial ship's neat formation broke apart as they tried to track multiple threats at once. Reed had learned to think differently, but his crews were still bound by centuries of Imperial training. They couldn't handle the chaos, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the changing situation. "Now show them why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy," Walker commanded. "Full attack run." The Defiant exploded into action, its engines pushing it to maximum acceleration. Instead of trying to hide, they charged straight at the nearest Imperial cruiser. The Empire's ships had been designed to fight at long range, their weapons optimized for battles fought across thousands of kilometers. They weren't prepared for an enemy that would fight at point-blank range. "They're trying to lock weapons," Mark reported, excitement in his voice. "The debris is confusing their targeting systems." The Defiant roared past the first Imperial cruiser, so close that the crews could see each other through their viewports. The human ship's guns fired continuously, not trying to destroy their massive opponent, but targeting specific systems. Weapons, sensors, engines. "Hard about," Walker ordered as they passed. "Same again. Keep them reacting. Don't give them time to think." The Defiant spun in space, a maneuver that Imperial ships of its size weren't supposed to be able to perform. They struck again and again, darting between the Imperial ships like a wolf among larger, slower prey. Each pass caused more damage. Each attack forced the Imperial ships to respond to a situation their training hadn't prepared them for. "Imperial ships breaking formation," Lisa reported. 3 cruisers have significant damage. They're calling for reinforcements." Walker nodded. "They've learned to think differently, but they haven't learned to trust their new thinking yet. The moment things go wrong, they fall back on their old ways." He turned to engineering. "How are our systems?" "Better," Thomas replied. "The break from stealth operations let the systems cool down. We can reactivate stealth in 5 minutes." "Perfect timing," Walker said as more Imperial ships appeared at the edge of their sensor range. "Let them see us win this fight. Then we vanish and let their imagination do our work for us." The Defiant made one final pass through the Imperial formation, its guns blazing. When it emerged on the other side, all 5 of Reed's cruisers were damaged, their neat formation shattered, their crews shaken by combat unlike anything in Imperial records. "Stealth systems ready," Thomas reported. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Walker ordered. "Let them hear this before we disappear." Lisa transmitted their message. "You tried to learn our ways, Commander Reed, but you forgot the most important lesson. Humans don't follow patterns. We create them. break them, and create new ones. We'll be watching your fleet, and next time, we'll have something new for you to learn. 1 month had passed since the UES Defiant first appeared in Imperial space. What had begun as a desperate mission by a single warship had evolved into something much more dangerous, a revolution of ideas. Captain Walker stood on the bridge, watching the holographic display that showed the current state of the Empire's territory. "Show me the rebellion zones again," Walker said. Red dots appeared across the map, marking places where subject species had begun rising up against Imperial rule. What had once been a few isolated incidents had spread like wildfire across dozens of star systems. 27 major uprisings, Lisa reported, and those are just the ones big enough for us to detect. Our broadcasts of Imperial defeats have reached over 200 systems now. Walker nodded with satisfaction. This had always been part of the plan, not just to stop the Empire's invasion fleet, but to show the galaxy that the mighty Empire wasn't invincible. Hope was spreading among species that had lived under Imperial control for centuries. "Imperial command ship detected," Mark announced from Tactical. "It's Reed again. He's brought a full battle group, 30 ships, including their new hunter-killer vessels." Walker moved to the main viewport, watching as the Imperial formation took shape at the edge of the system. Unlike the rigid patterns the Empire had used a month ago, this formation was fluid, adaptive. Reed had been learning. "He's good," Walker admitted. "He's adapted faster than any of the other Imperial commanders." He studied the formation, noting how the smaller ships moved in unpredictable patterns, while the larger vessels maintained a defensive core. "He's using our own tactics against us, but with Imperial resources." "Captain," Thomas called from engineering, concern in his voice. "I'm detecting unusual sensor activity. They're using a new type of scanning technology, something we haven't seen before." Walker frowned. "Can our stealth systems handle it?" Thomas worked his controls, running simulations. "I think so, but it's going to be close. They're clearly designed specifically to detect our stealth field." Lissa looked up from her communication station. Incoming transmission from Commander Reed. The bridge screens lit up with the image of Reed, his Imperial uniform pristine, his expression calm but determined. "Captain Walker. Yes, we know your name now. We know much about you and your ship." Walker kept his face neutral, not showing his surprise that the Empire had learned his identity. "Commander Reed, I see you've brought friends, afraid to face us alone again." Reed smiled slightly. "I've learned from you, Captain. Humans use every advantage they have. Only a fool fights with one arm tied behind his back." His expression grew more serious. "Your campaign has been impressive. You've hurt us, made us question methods that have served us for millennia. But it ends today." The transmission cut off, and Walker turned to his crew. "He's trying to get in our heads. Time to show him that humans don't rattle easily." He moved to the tactical station. "What's he really up to? This isn't just about catching us." Mark studied the Imperial deployment. "They're forming a perimeter around this entire sector. And look," he highlighted several ships on the display. "These vessels are broadcasting powerful signals on all frequencies. They're trying to blanket the area with communications." "They want to stop our broadcasts," Walker realized. "They know we've been inspiring rebellions. They're trying to cut off the flow of information." He smiled grimly. "Which means we're hurting them worse than we thought." The bridge crew exchanged looks of determination. What had started as a mission to delay the invasion fleet had become something much bigger. They were changing the Empire itself, forcing it to confront its own weaknesses. "New Imperial ships arriving," Mark reported suddenly. "Dozens of them. They're creating a full blockade of the system." Walker studied the tactical display, watching as more Imperial ships arrived. Reed was committing massive resources to this trap, far more than should be necessary to catch a single human warship. Something didn't add up. Why commit so many ships to catch us? Walker wondered aloud. Unless, his eyes widened in realization, unless they know what we've been planning next. He turned to Lisa. Any word from our allies? Lisa checked her communications. Last transmission from the Krull resistance was 6 hours ago. They were preparing for the operation as planned. Walker's mind raced. The plan had been their most ambitious yet, coordinating with 3 different resistance movements to simultaneously strike at Imperial fuel depots. If Reed knew about it, all those resistance fighters would be walking into a trap. We need to warn them, Walker said. But if we break stealth to send a message, Reed will have us. The crew fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Thousands of resistance fighters could die if they didn't warn them. But if the Defiant was caught, Earth would lose its last defender. There's another way, Thomas said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the engineer. We've been working on a modification to our communication systems. We can send a narrow beam transmission that might slip through their sensors, but he hesitated. We'd have to get dangerously close to one of their ships. Walker didn't hesitate. Plot the course. We're not letting those resistance fighters die. The Defiant moved silently through the Imperial blockade, its stealth systems straining against the new scanning technology. Every crew member held their breath as they slipped between massive Imperial warships, close enough to see individual weapons emplacements on their hulls. In position, Mark whispered, though there was no need to keep his voice down. Nearest Imperial ship is only 5 kilometers away. Send the warning, Walker ordered. Narrow beam, encrypted, resistance frequencies only. The message was sent, a tiny sliver of data slipping past the Imperial blockade. But as the transmission completed, alarms blared across the Defiance bridge. They've detected us, Thomas shouted. The new sensors picked up our transmission. The nearest Imperial ship immediately opened fire, massive energy weapons slicing through space where the Defiant had been moments before. The human ship's engines roared to life, pushing it away from the attack. All ships converging on our position, Mark reported, his voice tight with tension. They're using a search pattern we haven't seen before. Reed must have been planning this for weeks. Walker gripped the arms of his command chair. Full evasive maneuvers. Use the debris from their own shots for cover. The Defiant rolled and twisted through space, dodging the increasingly accurate Imperial fire. Reed had indeed learned from their previous encounters, anticipating the human ship's movements and countering their usual tactics. Engine hit, Thomas called out as the ship shuddered under Imperial fire. Stealth systems failing. We can't maintain the field. The Defiant flickered into visibility, its stealth systems offline. Immediately, dozens of Imperial weapons locked onto the human vessel. Walker knew they couldn't win this fight through conventional means. They were outgunned and surrounded. All power to forward shields, Walker ordered. Set course directly for Reed's command ship. His crew stared at him in disbelief. Sir, Mark questioned. They expect us to run, to hide, Walker explained. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going straight for their commander. The Defiant surged forward, absorbing punishing fire from all sides as it charged toward the Imperial command ship. Reed, seeing the human vessel barreling toward him, ordered his ship to take evasive action. But the massive Imperial vessel couldn't move quickly enough. Broadcast on all frequencies, Walker commanded. I want every ship in this sector to hear this. Lisa opened the channels, and Walker spoke clearly and confidently. Commander Reed, you've learned to fight like humans. Now learn to think like humans. Look at your tactical display, count your ships, then look at what those ships are supposed to be protecting. Across Imperial space, communications officers heard the transmission and relayed it to their commanders. Reed, his eyes widening, rushed to his main tactical display. While his entire battle group had been focused on trapping the Defiant, the Imperial home fleet had been drawn away from its normal patrol routes. The fuel depots, supposedly the targets of the resistance attack, had been a decoy. Check the Imperial Palace defenses, Reed ordered, sudden understanding dawning on his face. Reports flooded in. Palace defenses were under attack, but not by resistance fighters. The real attack was coming from within. from Imperial citizens inspired by the Defiance broadcasts. People who had never questioned Imperial rule were now rising up, demanding change. As the Defiant raced toward Reed's command ship, Walker continued his broadcast. "You've spent a month chasing one ship, Commander. But we weren't just fighting you with the Defiant. We were fighting you with an idea. The idea that the Empire isn't invincible, that change is possible. And ideas, Commander Reed, are much harder to kill than ships." Reed watched in shock as reports of civil unrest flooded in from across Imperial space. The Defiant had never been the real threat. It had simply been the spark that lit a much larger fire. A fire that was now burning through the very heart of the Empire. The Imperial Palace shimmered in the light of twin suns, its golden spires reaching toward the sky, like fingers grasping for the stars themselves. For 3,000 years, it had stood as the unquestioned center of power in the galaxy. No enemy had ever reached its hallowed halls. No challenge to its authority had ever succeeded. Until today. Inside the Grand Council chamber, the 12 High Lords of the Empire sat in stunned silence as reports continued to flood in. 43 systems in open rebellion. 17 Imperial fleet groups refusing orders. And most shocking of all, crowds of Imperial citizens gathering in the streets of the capital itself, demanding reforms that would have been unthinkable just months ago. "How did it come to this?" asked the eldest of the High Lords, his voice quavering with age and disbelief. "How could one human ship cause so much chaos?" The Imperial Intelligence Director rose from his seat, his face grave. "My lords, it was never about the ship. The humans understood something we have forgotten, that our greatest strength was also our greatest weakness." He activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the spread of rebellions across Imperial space. "For 3,000 years, we have ruled through power and fear. We made the galaxy afraid of us. The humans simply taught them not to be afraid anymore." In deep space, far from the Imperial capital, the UES Defiant limped through the darkness. The battle with Reed's forces had left the ship badly damaged. Life support was functioning on backup systems, and the main engines could manage only a fraction of their normal power. But they had survived, escaping the Imperial trap through a combination of daring and desperation. Captain Walker stood on the bridge, looking at the faces of his exhausted crew. They had accomplished something no one thought possible. A single human ship had changed the course of galactic history. "Damage report," Walker asked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation after a fire had broken out on the lower decks. "Not good," Thomas replied from engineering. "Main propulsion at 30%. Stealth systems completely offline. Weapons at 50%. He managed a tired smile. "But we're still flying, Captain." Walker nodded. They had known this mission might be one way. The fact that they were alive at all was a testament to their crew's skill and determination. "Captain," Lisa called from communications, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. "Incoming transmission from Earth. They're saying the Imperial invasion fleet has stopped advancing. They're holding position at the edge of our solar system." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. After weeks of fighting, the news seemed almost too good to believe. "More than that," Lisa continued, her eyes wide as she processed the incoming data. "The Imperial High Command has sent an official request for negotiations." She looked up, meeting Walker's gaze. "Captain, they want to talk peace." Walker moved to the main viewport, looking out at the stars. "They've realized that even if they destroy Earth, they can't destroy what we've started. The Empire is facing rebellions on too many fronts. They can't fight everyone at once." "Incoming transmission," Lisa announced. "It's from Commander Reed's ship." The bridge screens activated, showing Reed's face. The Imperial commander looked tired, the perfect composure of their first meeting, now replaced by the weariness of a man who had fought hard and learned difficult lessons. "Captain Walker," Reed began, his voice formal but lacking its earlier condescension. The Imperial High Council has authorized me to establish a direct communication channel for preliminary discussions regarding a potential cessation of hostilities. Walker allowed himself a small smile. In simple terms, Commander, they want to talk peace. Reed's expression remained carefully neutral, but Walker thought he saw a flicker of respect in the Imperial's eyes. Yes, recent events have caused a revaluation of Imperial policy regarding Earth and other non-Imperial worlds. Recent events, Walker repeated. You mean the fact that a single human warship made your entire empire question itself? That people throughout Imperial space are demanding change. Reed's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I have been instructed to arrange a meeting between representatives of Earth and the Imperial High Council. The meeting would take place on neutral ground, with full diplomatic protocols in effect. Walker considered this. It could be a trap, but his instincts told him otherwise. The Empire was pragmatic above all else. If continuing the war threatened their hold on power, they would seek peace, at least until they could regain control of their rebellious systems. We'll bring your offer back to Earth, Walker said. But understand this, Commander, we won't accept a peace that leaves the Empire free to threaten us in the future. And we won't abandon the people who have risen up against Imperial rule. Reed's expression changed slightly, something like surprise crossing his features. You truly care about the rebel worlds. They are not your people. That's the difference between us, Commander, Walker replied. You divide the galaxy into your people and others. We see all sentient beings as having the right to determine their own future. He leaned forward slightly. Remember that when your High Council is deciding what terms to offer. The transmission ended, and Walker turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. It's time to go home. As the Defiant limped toward Earth, Walker spent long hours in his quarters, thinking about what they had accomplished and what might come next. They had saved Earth, at least for now. But they had also started something much bigger, a fundamental change in how the galaxy viewed the Empire. 3 days later, the Defiant approached Earth's orbit. The planet's defensive fleet moved to escort them home, ships flashing their lights in salute to the vessel that had accomplished the impossible. As they made their final approach, Lisa called Walker to the communication station. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy, she said, wonder in her voice. Messages from worlds we've never contacted before. They've all heard about the Defiant, about what we did. She looked up at him, eyes shining. They're calling us the ship that changed the stars. Walker looked around at his crew, seeing in their faces the pride of people who knew they had made history. The Empire will try to regain control, he warned them. This isn't over. Peace talks could take years, and the Empire won't give up its power easily. But something has changed, Thomas said from his station. They can't go back to how things were. Too many people have seen that the Empire can be challenged. Walker nodded. That's our real victory. Not defeating their ships or disrupting their supply lines, but showing the galaxy that change is possible. He moved to the main viewport, watching as Earth grew larger in their view. The Empire built its power on the idea that resistance was futile. We showed everyone that one ship, one crew willing to think differently, could change everything. As the Defiant settled into orbit around Earth, news of their arrival spread across the planet. In cities and towns across the world, people gathered to celebrate the ship that had saved humanity from Imperial conquest. But in quiet conversations, in government halls and military bases, the discussions focused on what would come next.